And on behalf of the library, I'd like to welcome you to another installment of the University of Michigan AI Lab's Friday Night AI. Today, we are going to be talking about how AI can help us understand animal communication. And we've got a few of our friends with us as well as our panelists. So, and again, welcome to the Ann Arbor District Library. And without further ado.
All right. Well, I'd like to welcome everyone. Is it now on?
Screen is good.
Is it on?
Push it one more time.
I think this one is off. Yeah.
There it is.
Okay. Alrighty. So, thanks to Steve for the introduction, and it's great to be here again for Friday Night AI. We have started this series a few years ago with the goal to engage more closely with our community. We represent the Michigan AI Lab, where we do research in AI, and we've been doing that for many years. But we realize there is not enough communication with our community, and we think of it as a two-way street where we share what we do, but we also learn from all of you what are your thoughts and suggestions in general about research in AI. And I think this is even more relevant than ever, given how AI now is really spreading in the world. So for tonight, the topic is animal communication. This is an area that experts in biology and environmental science have been working for a long time. And more recently, we have started to also see some advances in AI in this space. We could think of social interactions as something that AI can explore, but primarily, which is really the focus of tonight's event, is animal communication. There are new perspectives that we can find, and you identify patterns and start to have a deeper understanding of these vocalizations, whether it's dog barks or primate calls or whale songs or bird communication. So tonight I'm joined by experts in this space, coming both from psychology and evolutionary biology. So we have Professor Tori Bergman right here. He is interested in how primates use communication and cognition to navigate the social world. And he's interested both in behavioral variation as well as consequences of behavior. And his main subjects are capuchin monkeys in Costa Rica and geladas in Ethiopia. Then next we have Artyom Abzaliev. He's a PhD student in the Michigan AI Lab, and he works on multimodal machine learning. And he has a particular interest in understanding animal communication. The work that he's done so far in this space address dog vocalization and bird vocalizations. And we also have Alvaro Vega Hidalgo, who's also a PhD student in the AI Lab. He's been working even before joining the AI with Tori, so that's the connection that brought him here. And he's working on computational approaches to studying animal communication and enhancing wildlife conservation. He worked with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology before, and he's primarily interested in primates. He's been working with monkeys in Costa Rica to understand their behavior and communication. And we have two more students, Yara El Tawil. She is a PhD student who's been helping with Friday Night AI, and she works on computational models of emotion recognition. And then Snehal Prabhudesai, who is also a PhD student at AI Lab and the Human-Computer Interaction Lab. She works on human-computer interaction and also uncertainty quantification. And we also have some two special members. We have Paddington and Nico, and we'll get to meet them in a bit. So just a few logistics, and maybe before I mention that, I'm not sure that I mentioned my name. I'm Rada Mihalcea. I've been also working in AI, and I'm also very interested in animal communication. So I've been delving a bit in this space, and I'll be helping primarily by moderating this panel. So first, we'll start with an activity just to get a little bit of a sense of this communication and what are some challenges there. And Yara and Sneha will lead us with that. Then we'll get to hear a little bit more about our special members tonight, Paddington and Nico. And then we'll have set of questions and answers with our panelists here to address some of the relevant aspects of AI and animal communication. And toward the end, we'll make sure to leave some time for you to ask questions. So if you think of any questions, please hold on to them, and there will be an opportunity to ask those at the end. All right, so with that, Yara, Neha.
Hi, everyone. I'm Yara, and
I am Snehal.
So the first thing we'd like to ask you to do is close your eyes, and I'm going to play a sound for you. If it works. Okay, so that was the sound of a Panama rainforest, and then we slowed down that sound to very slow. So now I'm going to play that same sound, but with someone describing what those slow parts are, and it's going to be really interesting to see just kind of like how you're able to break down those different parts.
These short, higher pitch sounds, the things that are two pulses, most of that's katydid calls. The really high-pitched regular sound is the sound of a bat flying through. So each of those is an individual echolocation call that it's sending out.
So yeah, we just kind of wanted to do that as like a little opener, set the scene, kind of understand how we're able to manipulate sounds and kind of learn about animal sounds, and maybe in a way that even if we don't understand them, we're able to break them down and kind of get into it. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to be the AI ourselves. So if anyone could scan the QR code on the screen, or there's a couple signs around, and then we can do a little animal sound classification quiz. See if it works, hopefully. Maybe we'll give it another 20 seconds for everyone to join. All right, cool. Looks like we got quite a few participants, so we will start. All right, so I'm going to play a sound, and I want you to think about which breed of dog you think is barking. I'll play it one more time. All right, go ahead and answer on your quiz. Oh, I see. Oh, okay, yeah. That's what I'm glad it works. I didn't test it. Okay, so the quiz is about 3 seconds from closing, so if you haven't locked in your guess. Okay, and as most of you guessed, it is a Chihuahua. Yay. Okay, same question, different sound. Okay, questions open. Five seconds if you haven't guessed yet. All right, so most of you guessed correctly. It is a poodle. But actually, interestingly, the AI that was built that uses this sound, according to Artem, actually fails to guess the poodle. It gets the chihuahua right, but not the poodle. So most of you have done better. Okay, so now that we have kind of gone between classification of animal breeds, we're going to now see if we're able to see what a cat is communicating. So we're going to take, we're going to hear a sound, and I want you to guess the context of the meow that you're hearing. One more time. Five seconds. Okay. So this is a happy cat who is being brushed or pet. Yeah, I know, it's confusing. Most people guessed waiting for food or in an unfamiliar environment, so. Okay, same question, new sound. All right, so most of you, actually it's about 50-50. 50% of you are correct. The cat is isolated in an unfamiliar environment. But goes to show kind of like how this nuance is so hard to find, right? Like the sounds are very similar to maybe a cat that if your cat, when it's waiting for food, it sounds like that. So just goes to show like how hard of a problem we have to solve with animal communication. Okay, now we're gonna get even harder. So I'm gonna play two sounds, and they are going to be either made by the same capuchin or two different ones. And the sound is actually also gonna play slowed down after it plays the first time. So you get a little bit more, I'm helping you a little bit. So that was all the same sound, and now it's gonna play slowed down. Okay, so that was the first sound. Here's the second one. And here it is slowed down. Okay, so I'm gonna open up the quiz. I want you to tell me if it's the same individual who's made these two sounds or if it's two different ones. Oh, did it open? No. Maybe reload your page. I think it looks like it's working. Okay. 50-50 split, but it is the same one. So it's just one individual making that sound. I think her name is Trudy, if I remember correctly. All right, so same question, two different sounds, two new sounds. Sorry, technical difficulties. And here's a second sound. All right, I've opened up the quiz. Go ahead. All right. So most of you actually guessed correctly. These are two different capuchins making this sound. And just kind of wanted to show you this to kind of demonstrate maybe the different ways we're able to manipulate the sounds so that, again, we're able to try to get more information out of something that sounds, when they're played fast, they sound pretty similar, right? So the quiz is over, and we actually have a leaderboard. So if you are Lucas or Will, please come see me after. You have won a t-shirt. You guys got most of the questions right and the fastest. So really quick, I know we're running low on time, so I'm just going to show you a couple sounds that are just generally interesting. So this first one is a bearded seal, and I was also going to highlight that there's another way to kind of visualize the sound as a spectrogram. So that's another way that we're able to kind of learn about who would have thought a seal sounded like that, right? And then this one's also pretty interesting. So bull elephants are a species that have a specific sound for if there are bees and that they should leave. And they actually, Alvaro was telling us that if you play that sound for the elephants, they actually react very agitated. So I don't know if this is the exact sound, but it is a very interesting fun fact. And then if you play the sound a little slowed down or sped up, maybe. There we go. So yeah, I hope you learned a lot from this quiz. It's just a way to kind of get it, like set the stage for animal communication and just learn about why this is such a hard problem to solve. And now we turn it over to our panelists and our guests. And yeah, thank you.
All right, well, thanks so much. And you got to experience some ways to communicate, but there is also more. So when we think of therapy, we usually think of counselors and human therapists, but there are also dog therapists. And so maybe if we can get Nico's and Paddington's friends to introduce them. Either way, or I can give you maybe this, whichever way.
Hi, my name is Anne-Marie Vaquera. I'm a security sergeant with DPSS at the University of Michigan. This is my partner, Nico. Nico's primary mission is to work with survivors of interpersonal violence and domestic assault, so he can be present during police interviews as people share some pretty tough stories. He can also go to court with survivors, so he can accompany our students to court if that's something that they feel like would benefit them. And then when he's not doing that, he comes out to community engagement events and meets people, kind of keeping his exposure and sociability up. So thank you for having us today.
Maybe we can take a quick question if there is any quick question. Hey. Nico?
Yes. What is he trained to do?
So therapy dogs are selected for their temperament first.
Oh, so he's a therapy dog.
Yes. Right. So there's like a 3-layer distinction. We have service dogs that are trained to perform a specific task. They're protected by the American with Disabilities Act legally. Then there's therapy dogs that are not protected by law. Therapy dogs are picked for their temperaments first and then trained in basic obedience. So Nico came from Paws and Stripes College in Brevard County, Florida. He's a rescue dog. It's a nonprofit that takes rescue dogs out of the shelters and picks the ones with good temperaments for therapy work and places them with law enforcement around the country for free. So he's, and then we have, of course, emotional support animals, which are just for that individual owner and their own animal. Yes.
What's the aspect of therapy that's being provided by the dogs?
Yeah, so studies have shown that petting any animal reduces stress hormones and increases endorphins. So what I've found when we're sitting in interviews with survivors is that they tend to remember more details and they talk a lot more than if a therapy dog is not present. And of course, it is something you would have to request. It's not something that's just there because we do want to be careful of anybody who has an allergy or aversion to dogs. It would obviously not be stress reducing if you had a fear. But yeah, petting animals in a stressful situation can help body chemistry, help you calm down overall. So yeah, that's his primary function. He loves and receives love. Anyone else?
Don't come in and see if there are questions for.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brenda. This is Paddington. He is an almost 8-year-old Newfoundland dog. We've been doing therapy for about 7 years now. So as soon as he turned a year old, which is how old you have to be to get certified. So we've been doing therapy for 7 years. Our favorite locations to visit are typically schools, libraries, any place that has a population under the age of 35 is what gets him excited. And he's really lazy, so he's probably just going to scoot sooner than later. But yeah, we're with an organization called Therapods of Michigan, and we essentially go to, sorry, Bubby. We typically go to any place within the Washtenaw County that will ask for our assistance. So this is Paddington.
We can take a quick question for Paddington.
Hi, Bubby.
Quick question. One quick question.
If you want to know more about us or our organization, I'll be here for a bit, so we don't have to get.
Oh, so there is one in the back.
Do they go home and come to work, or do they?
Yeah, so he's my personal companion dog. So once we're done with this, we'll go home. He'll sleep on his bed, and I'll just go about life. So yeah, when he works, he's a therapy dog. When he's not doing therapy dog stuff, he's just a regular pet. We go for walks, and we do just regular dog, human companion dog stuff. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Okay, so we can move on to some questions. I will start by asking a few questions to our panelists just to set the stage, and then, like I said, there will be opportunities for you to ask questions. So my first question, I did introduce Tori and Artyom and Alvaro, but just to hear from them about their career trajectory and also what drew you to this space of AI and animal communication. We can start anywhere, I don't know.
I think Tori has been in longest in the field.
Yes, okay.
Okay,
let's start with
seniority.
that.
Yeah, so I'm Tori. I've been studying primates for 30 years, studying primate communication for 20-some years. I got interested in just how primates behave and their social behavior pretty early on in grad school. And then I started working more in vocal communication just because I think it's a really fascinating part of their behavior, and it's something a lot of researchers kind of overlook or didn't pay as much attention to. And it also has really, I think, interesting parallels to humans. So we're a pretty uniquely vocal species, and it's a pretty interesting question, I think, to think about how we got to be these incredibly eloquent, some of us, not me, species compared to other primates. So that's my interest. And I came to AI relatively recently, so I'm very interested and excited about the possibility of using these new tools to help us better understand what the animals are talking about.
Thank you.
Hi. So I'm a PhD student, and I'm mostly working. I always loved computer science, so animals was not like my first priority, but I always loved animals by themselves. So that's why I think it's super cool, and I think it's kind of futuristic, right? In the future, we can imagine like having, I don't know, translator device that I just talk to my dog, and I don't know. This, of course, like utopic and futuristic idea, but I believe, I don't know, in my lifetime, it's possible to say something like this. Not complete, of course, I don't know, but something like, hey, I'm hungry in human voice from your dog. I think it's possible. Just need a lot of work. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. I started actually as a tropical biologist at the National University of Costa Rica, and I had the privilege of every weekend spend my time in the rainforest and the cloud forest, the dry forest, chasing monkeys or birds or interacting with a big diversity, very precious diversity that we should protect, by the way. But very fast, very quickly after Calculus 1, I was like, is this really all the math we're gonna see? Like, I love math, like, where's the, I need more. So I started like using more computers and like finding programming languages very interesting. And later on, when I graduated, I found opportunities to keep working with more computer work and found like financial benefits for that. So I started doing a freelancer career, eventually worked for Cornell University, doing machine learning for analyzing vocalizations of insects and birds. And we found that, well, yeah, we'll talk more about this, but just to keep it short, after that, I had the big privilege of being contacted with the University of Michigan through Thori, and also with Rada. And then I think I always had the dream of helping communities get closer to nature. And I think that when you really put yourself in the 6 feet of an insect or in the 4 feet of a dog, or, when you really have to force yourself to think like them and what they're going through and what they might be concerned about and might want to express to each other, is a very great exercise of empathy that can only end up with great results. And AI, I think, is a very powerful tool that can help us augment that capacity.
Well, thank you, and it's great to hear about all these different paths that eventually led to where we are tonight, an interest in AI and animal communication, what brings us together. And before we even go deeper into that, I'd be curious to hear more why should we even care? Why would we care about knowing more about animal communication?
Well, personally, I'm obviously a little biased. I spent my life studying it, so I think it's just really fascinating. So there's a really just interesting component to it. I think even if we're not just drawn to animals or want to understand or know about them, just to understand our own place in the world, I think it's really important to know how we're similar to other animals, how we're different from other animals. And one way in which we might be particularly different from other animals is in the way we use sound, but we're finding more and more that there is overlap with other animals. And so I think that's a potential area where we can, with greater ability to understand the variation in what animals are saying, we'll see more of these connections. So.
Yeah, I was already talking about it in the last response. I think that, a big thing is conservation and sustainability. We cannot no person wants to preserve something that they don't know about. If I right now ask you guys who wants to preserve onicoforans, nobody raised their hands. It's very sad because they're incredible beings that have not changed since the dinosaurs were around, and they were very basic plan is the same. They do the same thing, and why? Are they lazy, or are they very effective at what they do? They seem harmless. It's very weird. It's very hard to understand them, and a lot of people spend their lives doing this. But once to communicate these kind of stories, I think it's very useful to have a story such as they are communicating this about themselves. With animal communication, for instance, alarm calls seems to be something that is very widespread around animals, and maybe we can have systems that can tell us about how many alarm calls they do per week, a number of animals in a forest or something, and that can tell us how they're doing, if they're doing worse or better. So yeah, I think conservation is the big one for me, but also animal welfare of domesticated animals. I've been learning. One post said probably people that work with cows, farmers, if they can know how cows are doing, probably they will be able to have having more productivity in their milk, for instance, and better meat. But also they might turn vegetarian. So that's a interesting axis.
So moving now to so one is on the animal communication side, why to even care about that? And I think, at least to me, even broadly about intelligence, right? So learning about other forms of intelligence is also something that to me is very, very interesting, if this could lead us at least to partly uncover some of that. And now moving more to the AI side, just very in broad terms, what are some of the main methods that are used to decode signals or patterns that can be used for understanding animal communication? Maybe Artyom, if you wanted to take this one.
So I think Tori will talk more about traditional after me. I'm more coming from like more new school. So right now, everything is basically, as you saw, like from ChatGPT and everything is learned from the data. So originally, people, I think, were looking manually and trying to understand, like, what does it mean? What's the meaning behind? But now, so what we're trying to do is just like learn from the data, collect the data, whatever is available there, either like in the wild. Of course, collect data sounds easy, but it's extremely hard process. So for instance, Tori spent how many months in Ethiopia collecting the data? I don't know.
Well, we've been doing it for 20 years now, so.
Yeah, so that's and
So that's 480 months.
yeah, and it's still probably one like 100,000th of ChatGPT data. I don't know, something like this, right? Yeah, so it's extremely laborious and expensive process and requires a lot of expertise. So this is the main problem that I think we're facing right now. There is no data compared to, let's say, I don't know, human or I don't know. You probably right now, even during this talk, send a couple of messages. So and Facebook probably would train their model on this data. Hopefully not, but you know, you never know. So that's the problem. All the yeah, we need a lot of data. As for the methods themselves, it's I mean, it's everywhere. Just neural networks these days, just trying to fit the data as good as you can and produce something meaningful out of it. Another problem, of course, we know like human language. We know what the word, we know what the character is, we know what phoneme is, but we don't know this for dogs, for I don't know, for any animal basically. We know some parts. I think Tori, for instance, knows perfectly the vocabulary of capuchin monkeys, but I have no idea. So yeah, it's a very expensive process and laborious.
Did you want to add anything, Tori, about some like statistical analysis or?
No, I mean, it's part of the reason we're excited about these newer methods is they're replacing very laborious, sort of doing things by hand, annotating things and pulling out, you know, measurements from sounds in a sort of very slow call-by-call process. So the more we can speed that up, the more we can learn. Like, you know, if we had some of these methods when I was in grad school, we would be much further along in understanding the vocalizations of these animals.
So you've been working for a while in this space, and I know also Alvaro and Artyom, you've been doing some work on different species. What do you think are some of the more exciting discoveries that have been made so far with the help of AI?
I want to say hello to Paddington. That's why I'm working on this. Or say, how are you doing, Paddington? And like, how does it feel to be old, Paddington? You know, you're 8 years old. So how do you feel working? What, like, did you talk to other dogs about your work or something like this? You know, that's, I mean, as stupid as it sounds, right? It's not completely unfeasible, I think. We will see.
But in terms of like what was done so far, like for instance in your work, like what is something that you think is interesting from what you uncovered so far? Like, I think talking to Paddington is maybe more for the like, future work part, but like
future 100 years, yes. I don't know. I think just generally. So my work was on recognizing like what information can you get from the dog barks, like whether it's which breed is it, which is relatively easy, especially for Chihuahua. They have very distinct sound. But I don't know, like generally understanding animals better. That's understanding my dog better, for instance. I don't know. Do you want to eat or do you want to go out? I don't know. That would be helpful to at least have an app on the phone that would be able to do that.
I think if I can add a little bit, also in my experience, as I read exciting papers, I mean, I want to talk about other papers and then what I worked personally. I found like interest in using AI as a pattern. It is very good at pattern recognition. So that is something that scientists had some tools that were just updated to a super high level. So having high capacities at pattern recognition doesn't mean that you have high capacities understanding the whole complexity of an animal, especially if this animal is deep in the sea, very far away from anything that you can see with your eyes or with your sensors. But for instance, for these kind of marine animals, when you put a microphone in the water, you can, I don't know if you've done that, but when you're in the water, you can sometimes hear the squeaks of something metallic that's in the extreme other part because sound propagates very well in the water. And same with vocalizations of marine mammals, like beluga whales, orcas. And then when you have an array of microphones like they deploy in the sea, you have a cocktail problem. A cocktail party problem is how they call it, right? When you're trying to talk, but there's like 50 conversations around you, and you're really trying to, sometimes you're like, can you speak louder? Or you struggle, even like you evolved to distinguish each other's conversation. But in this case, as we try to decode what they're talking about or what they're signaling, we need to process these signals with AI, and they've accomplished getting a single channel for each of the potential conversations that are occurring at the same time. And I think that's a very substantial step forward. After that, we need a lot of more behavioral data to actually correlate and understand what these patterns mean. But a lot of works like this has happened, and also alarm calls is a big one that also have been being reported more and more in the literature using AI in different species. And just to cite another modality, the house cricket showed that they could use AI to see how the antennae movement will indicate one odor or another. So that gives me some sci-fi ideas that might not be sci-fi in the close future. Like maybe we can have crickets that tell you that there's some kind of dangerous chemical around or something. You know, like it will be super cool to leverage these kind of capacities of these very sensitive animals to others.
And Artyom, you mentioned data. And Tori, you were saying that's more than 200 months of collecting data. So what are some of the challenges in collecting data? Of course, when we talk about like human data, we have thousands, like, I don't know, millions, terabytes of data. But then for animals, it's a whole lot of different challenges.
Yeah, for sure. So it's, I mean, the first part is for wild animals, you have to habituate them so you can get close to them and you're not freaking them out, and so they start to exhibit their natural behavior. So that takes months or years in some cases. And then you also have to learn individuals, because most of the stuff we care about, we don't just care that a monkey is calling, we care which monkey is calling and how they're communicating with each other and which particular individuals are doing certain things. And so you have to know which individuals they are, and so you have to learn them, and that takes time. And then you have to find them out in the forest, and then, you know, with the capuchin monkeys, they're arboreal, they're up in the trees. Often, though 20 monkeys around you, and all you can see is maybe 1 foot dangling from a branch over here, and the rest of them are hidden. You know they're there, but they're hidden. And so, you know, all these kinds of challenges of getting a vocalization from an individual that you know that was that individual, you got a clean recording of it, there weren't birds chirping and cicadas and all these other things happening, someone wasn't stepping on a leaf, someone wasn't talking to you at the time you're quiet. So there's, you know, it can be, it takes a long time. You get the perfect call and you're very excited, but you know, it's hours and hours of work to get a single recording sometimes.
Yeah, I guess that's how we were doing machine learning before I guess internet, or before I guess recent ChatGPT times. But it turned out like that's what I'm excited about. Turns out you can just throw extremely noisy data, like internet data, for instance, and just like, but you need a lot of it, and like just fit a neural network on top of this. So I'm excited to explore this direction. Maybe something will happen out of it. We don't have, of course, internet for monkeys or for any animals, but I don't know, maybe there are smart ways to get, like, I don't know, because birds, for instance, for birds we have a lot of data. So for birds you can try to do something like this. So I'm excited about this direction. But for dogs, people upload videos, of course, so there is enough videos about this, and we were able to get like videos with a description, I don't know, Paddington barks at, I don't know, at crow, something like this. But it's still relatively low amount, so it's not even like remotely close to human data. So a lot of challenges.
And then just to add to that, like oftentimes when we work with human data, there is some labeling, right? So you know something about the data. How do you go about labeling animal communication data?
I'm obsessed with that problem, because I think that's when we have the big opportunity of opening the doors of our lab and actually have a lot of people enter and do what we call citizen science. And I actually made an app that works like Tinder, because you swipe right if you think that the call that's presented to you is well identified by the AI to the species that it's saying that it is. So I don't know if you know bird watchers or are bird watchers here at all, but hey, I salute you. So bird watchers spend a lot of time learning a lot about this species and can verify AI and can tell it you're wrong. Like this is not Henry Corina leucophrys. Like it is this, I don't know, these other species. and that's where we can use people's help. And so I think that it shouldn't be looked as a problem only. And I see a lot of the field trying to just bypass it. And I think it makes a lot of sense and we should do that for sure. But also we should take the advantage of the opportunity to reach out to get millions of submissions from citizen scientists and increase the impact of these projects.
And say, we talked a little bit about the models, we talked a little bit about the data, and if we were to follow the typical pipeline, we get data into a model, we build something, say something comes out, how do we even know that it's a good something, right? So again, we make the analogy with human data. If we produce some speech or say ChatGPT, we can look at it and say, yes, it's good, no, it's not. But when you produce something, whether it's a classification or maybe generation for animal data, how do we know? So how do we go about evaluating these models?
Well, in the case of the stuff we've worked on, we ground truth it with known categorizations or known, so we have one question we've been working on is individual identification. And so we're hoping that we can eventually just put passive recorders out in the forest and let them run, and they'll pick up the monkey sounds, and we'll be able to classify which individuals producing those calls, even though we didn't see who did it, just based on the call itself. And so we're making some progress in that, but as part of the training and validating step, that we can have the models identify which individual, and then we can go back to the known calls that we know came from that individual and see if they're getting it right.
Anything else to add? Like, I know we've been thinking about generation also. Like, if you generate something, how do you know that it's valid generation or nonsense? Or even on the interpretation side, whichever.
So I think this problem is also open for language models. So Google released like Gemini, I think, a couple of days ago, and like you personally might have interacted or not with this, but like for instance, the problem: how do you evaluate whether Gemini is better than ChatGPT or not? So what people were doing, there are benchmarks, of course, like kind of like exam. For instance, I don't know whether you knew that ChatGPT passed sommelier exam, so it's excellent, has excellent understanding of wines, so without ever trying, which is, I think, hilarious. So, but basically what people were doing, it's kind of like in chess. In chess, there's Elo rating system, so comparing two models with each other, which model wins, so which model the user prefers, similar to what Alvaro was saying, like Tinder, which model is better. And for generation, it is like kind of soft problem for language models, but for animal communication, there is nothing like this. We can try, maybe bird watchers can tell us, hey, this is better than generation than for this particular species, but still it's a very hard problem. We don't basically know, or I don't know, we don't even know, like, again, words, characters, phonemes. So it's pretty hard problem. We probably need some specialists, basically, like Tori.
Alvaro, I see you want to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to add that a metaphor that's used commonly in this problem is the Rosetta Stone. I don't know if you heard about it. So I think 1700s people found, archaeologists found a stone that gives the code from Greek to Egyptian hieroglyphs, I think, if that's, did I pronounce well the word? Yeah, okay. And from that, they could understand all the material that was written in a lot of very interesting stuff that was for sure very important. So you'll see like Tutankhamun's tomb or whatever, and this is for sure important stuff. Like you want to understand it, but you don't know how to decode it. But now with the Rosetta Stone, if you know Greek, then you can just decode it. So what people say here to comprehend quickly is like behavior is probably the Rosetta Stone here, and very controlled experiments is the Rosetta Stone for decoding animal communication. Because if you elicit one signal and you measure consistently the same response from the animal, then probably there's a correspondence there, there's a causality. and then you can try to find, because of the context, what it really means. So there's debated results on one research, for instance, in which somebody with a shirt of one color shows up and a prairie dog does one kind of call. And if it shows up with another color, then it makes another call that's different. So that's been proposed. The authors proposed that these experiments that the Rosetta Stone to decode the communication system of these species. It's very highly debated because people have not been able to replicate it very well in this specific case, and they haven't used AI. So it's a great opportunity to try to run these experiments and also get all the AI to see if we can find more about it.
All right, so I'm getting to my last question, and then we can take questions from the audience. And I'm told by the library that we can stay a little longer, so just because we started a little late. So my final question is, what do you think are the main opportunities and challenges, and where do you see this field in, say, 5-10 years from now? So AI for animal communication. Tori, you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I think we've identified the main challenges, the data. We need more data, and not just more of it, but also I think this Rosetta Stone idea that we have more data linked to the behavior so that we don't just have random calls recorded. We can get lots of those, but we would like to know something about what was happening when those sounds were made so we can get a better understanding of potentially sort of the meaning of those sounds. So I think that's a major challenge.
I guess other than data, we need more, I think, understanding, because many people kind of challenge this idea, hey, this is like, animals are stupid, just leave them and, make my Facebook feed better or something like this. I'm kidding, of course, but I think like generally in society I think we need an increase of awareness that we're sharing the planet together, we're living together, and those are sentient and conscious creatures to understand basically better, kind of like what's the word, rather like non-human centric approach, or what is in the book, like, sorry? It's more than human approach. Yeah, more than human approach. I think something like this. Yeah, there's a term for that. Yeah.
I think that with the recent revolution on AI, what we can see in the last months is the agents. So large language model agents. We know that this is a very powerful tool, and how we're going to apply it to these new problems is also a problem by itself. And we see the first attempts of making large language models specifically good at inferring things related to animal communication. But I have seen a lot of cutting corners. Like, they go so quickly that they promise they're translating from dog language to English, when you really look at the methods and it doesn't make sense from a scientific rigorous perspective. So to have a good marriage between like scientific rigor and these new techniques will really unleash revolution in animal communication, I think.
All right, so now it's time to get questions from the audience, and if you could please wait for the microphone. Maybe I saw this hand first here, or I don't know if you're there already.
Hi, my question is your thoughts from the panel about the dog buttons that we all see on TikTok and YouTube. And is there really communication going on there, or is the dog like the old horse that knew how to do math responding to the human?
Does anyone want to take that? I actually don't know. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, the buttons.
So these dogs are.
Me, go out, or whatever. Go out, me. I don't know, whatever they are.
Yeah, these dogs are trained to push buttons, and the buttons often will say a word, like they're just tied to a recording of the word. And then, so it's a way to communicate with your dog. And I think there is definitely communication happening there. But I think there is a lot of sort of clever Hans type things happening too, that there's a lot of overinterpretation of what the dogs are doing. On the one hand, we shouldn't be at all surprised that animals can, push a lever for a reward, or like have some association between a cue and an outcome. Pigeons have done this for centuries, really. So, animals obviously can learn associations between things, and if they learn that if I push this button, I get food, that's not too surprising that they will do that. So the tricky part of it comes down to these combinations of these buttons and how meaningful those are and how much they understand about what they're doing versus sort of trial and error and hoping to get a combination that leads to an outcome like I get to go outside or I get to do what I want to do. So I think they're definitely very interesting. There's something going on there, but I think we need to study it more carefully to see.
Have you done it with your monkeys?
No, we haven't done where they make sounds. We've done some sort of puzzle kinds of things where they can interact with, but not with making vocal sounds. I think part of it is that if they were to push a button and it made a monkey sound, that would probably scare them. Especially if they didn't know who it was, or if they did know who it was and they weren't there, like that's kind of what's strange for them. Or if it was a human sound, it would be even stranger. So.
Hi, I have a two-part question. How do we?
Maybe one question at a time, so we get to more people.
Okay. I think it's related to the other part, but the first part is how do we know that the human categorizations of the sounds are correct?
Yes, great question. We don't know. So we assume, right? We assume we have some follow-ups, right? Let's say, I don't know, if the cat was meowing and then I gave food and it stopped meowing, we would assume that this was particular because it was hungry. But we never know for sure.
But I'd say also, which maybe we haven't mentioned explicitly, but you got to experience that during the exercise that Yara and Sneha did. There is association with context, right? So it's not always human labeling. There is also what sound do they make, say, if they ask for food, or if there is another, being closed in an unknown environment. So that's something that we can trust that would be correct because it's the environment.
If I can add quickly,
Quickly, yes.
Okay, in the case of elephants, they show that there's an alarm call that's specific for bees. So if I had to translate to English, I would say bees, run, right? But I wouldn't do that. I would just say this call is associated with moving their heads and try to search and hide in a very specific way that will only be effective for bees and not for other threats.
We also, sorry, just one, that reminded me. So we do playback experiments where we play the sounds back to them too and see how they respond. So that's another way to validate that we think we're interpreting them correctly.
So in terms of training a model on bird vocalizations, I was curious about when it comes down to it, do you know what the most distinguishing features are in terms of identifying different species? Is it the pitch of the sound or the number of sounds it makes per second? Or something like that?
Probably a combination of things. It's just like a face. Why do you know that your mom is your mom? Is it because her eyes or her hair or her nose? It's a composition of patterns. I think it's similar with audio. In some instances, it's more specific to some features like rate of how quickly they're doing the sound or the pitch, like you said. So it depends on the species, biologists saying all answers to all questions. But many times it's about pattern recognition, the whole structure of it. We call it also harmonic structure when it comes to audio specifically.
And Artyom, do you want to add a little bit about what you've done with the parus minor? Just trying to uncover patterns that you don't even know in these associations?
Sure. So we've been working within one species, so it's not how to differentiate between different species, but basically, yeah, what Alvaro was saying is you look at the spectrogram. You guys saw this at the beginning. The spectrogram, it's basically image. So, and the nice thing about this, you can apply computer vision methods to this. So it's basically no longer sound, and I think sound is kind of hard to work with. Basically, because in sound you measure, in simplest case, 16,000 floats per second. So that's a lot for computers to process. So that's why it's much easier to work with images. So yeah. Basically, it's they have distinct shapes. If you look at this, I think you can see basically often that it's different things.
And the thing that I think is interesting is they can actually start uncovering things that we don't even know, right? So for humans, we can tell apart the words. For birds, we don't know. So with these methods, you can start uncovering, right? So those patterns, they wouldn't be necessarily words, but start going a little bit deeper in what they mean.
So in generative AI usage in playback experiments, right, how worried are you that if you don't get close enough when you first try, the animals would actually figure out it's synthetic, right, and they just maybe change their behavior or just ignore it, right? So then you're kind of blown it with that specific set of the animals.
Yeah. Did you say generative? Or
Yeah, specifically with generative, right?
Yeah, so we haven't done those yet. That's our future. But whenever we do playbacks, we're worried about them figuring out that it's an artificial situation and either habituating or just stopping to respond or whatever. So we're very careful about hiding the speaker and making sure it's a realistic situation. And we do them at a slow rate so that they're hearing lots of natural sounds in between. So we would do like one playback with one group and then wait a few days before we do another one on that group. So they've had lots of natural interactions. But that's definitely a concern that once you've sort of spoiled them for these experiments, then it'd be hard. You wouldn't be able to go back to them.
So you guys are looking a lot at like the auditory signature of how these animals communicate, but I imagine body language is a huge part as well. Are you incorporating any kind of multimodal methods to this yet, or is it just with the sound?
So this is a great question, again, for dogs particularly, right? Because the ears alone can play a big role. So the short answer, we are working to this, but so far, no. But main reason, again, because of the data, how hard is it? Just collecting audio, right? That was extremely complicated. So, and like video, for instance, as you mentioned, right? Get just lag or something like this. And so our vision, unfortunately, is not, like computer vision as a like state, is not there yet to like, picking up one single like lag and saying, hey, there's monkey on this image. So, yeah, it's still open problem, but yeah, it's exactly one of the directions.
You should be following the Michigan AI Lab because we will probably be running crowdsourcing efforts through the next months to try to get data, multimodal data, to do these kind of things.
Yes, in the back there.
Within the animal communication calls, have you seen differences within the same species based on the geo or context where that particular animal or pod is located or found? Or is it consistent? It doesn't matter what the context and surrounding is?
Absolutely. In Costa Rica, there's a very incredible bird called the bellbird. You can search for it. Super loud noises, and they call it that there's two dialects in the country, in the south and in the north, and they converge in some areas, and some individuals speak both dialects. And this is called cultural evolution also, and cultural learning, and it's a very interesting thing. It has, cultural learning is a very interesting thing. I'm just gonna keep it there, but yeah, the answer is yes.
I think there was one more in the back.
Yeah, the last two speakers I had several questions. They asked especially the multimodal, so I'm glad that I don't have to ask that. But with all this, can you classify the intelligence of animals and then correlate with it, say, number of, neurons in their brains and, come up with different scores from the common understanding, like cats are not as intelligent as dogs, for example, very common, something like that.
They get offended to hear you.
So, I mean, this is something people are very interested in and do study quite a bit, is how intelligent different species are, or the cognitive complexity of different species and how that correlates with brains and brain structure. So it's an open area of research, and there does seem to be generally a positive correlation that animals with larger brains tend to do better on some cognitive tasks. There's a big caveat: they have to control for body size, so that's a big factor. Bigger animals just have bigger brains because they need to run a bigger machine, more motor output and things like that. And also they just seem to have a little extra energy capacity to carry a bigger brain too. So, the first thing that comes out when you compare brain size across species is body size. But after that, there's interesting variation that does seem to relate to complexity. It doesn't seem to relate to communicative complexity directly, necessarily. In a big scale, if you think about primates in general have extremely large brains, and they're not, other than us, the most vocally interesting animals. Birds are much more vocally complex in most cases. So, there's these interesting patterns of differences and similarities in some cases between brain size, cognition, and communication.
I think there is a lot that we don't even know. I mean, I feel very humble when I think about animal intelligence in general. There is so much we just don't know. And there is also this thread, and you'll see when you start reading books about that, there are people who are very much, I guess, like our panelists, believing that there is a lot of intelligence out there, and then there are others who are very dismissive and kind of like feeling the human supremacy threatened. And then you get more of this, like, well, there isn't really much to learn there, just leave them alone. To me, I think there is a lot that we just don't know, and I think there are certain forms of intelligence that probably they are better than humans, and other forms that are maybe less. So maybe they don't do sophisticated math, but they might do other things that we cannot do. So I see there is 6 words. Yes, definitely.
Collective intelligence of ants is superior. That's it. No, it's very, very interesting. Also, collective intelligence.
And maybe we can take one more after that.
Hello, my name is Lucas. I'm just wondering that do animals like human learn language and develop the ability to express increasingly complex thoughts? Like from childhood to adulthood, we can express more complex thoughts. So I just wondering, is there any evidence or findings just like this phenomena?
So there's a couple ways to answer that. One is, so we tried to teach animals language. We've been doing this for a long time. So there's some of these ape language projects where they tried to teach animals sign language and lexigram languages. With some degrees of success, I think animals can very definitely learn sound meaning pairs. Then the question is, how do they combine them, and do they get into more syntactical kinds of communication? Much murkier evidence for that and much more controversy around that. The other thing is how much natural development there is of the communication systems of animals. Some species show a lot of development, and so they're always open to environmental input. A lot of these famous birds that mimic sounds can always learn a new sound, sort of the way humans can. But I think that's something that we don't quite realize how unusual it is, that we can hear a sound right now as an adult and immediately mimic it back. Like, very few animals can do that, almost none. That's an incredible level of vocal plasticity, and certainly no other primates do that. So most primates are born within the first few months of life producing all the sounds they're going to make in their whole life. Sometimes they narrow them down and they use them in different contexts, and there's some subtle variation that happens as they get older. But we're really unusual as primates in how vocally plastic we are.
And I know of some evidence, without knowing a whole lot, is really just from reading on birds, on how baby birds have limited vocabulary or vocalization they have, and they learn from their parents and evolve into that, which I think is part of your question on that, like how offsprings would learn through adulthood. I think one more, someone who hasn't asked before, and then you can come and ask them.
Yeah, I guess so you've talked about this concept of phonemes and the building blocks and the question of what is actually carrying the information as signal. And I know that this is sometimes difficult to tell, especially for species like whales, where the communication is very complex. But do you, like for, let's say, capuchins, do you understand what the phonemes are? Do you have a good grasp of all the maybe not what the information is, but which parts of the vocalization are carrying it?
That's a good question. So it's tricky because, first of all, capuchins don't combine calls together very much. They generally produce a single call in a single context. Some species do combine calls together and many different types of calls in different situations. And there it gets interesting to think about the different phonemes or notes or codas or whatever, however you want to describe that structure. There are animals who combine things together in potentially interesting ways. The way I think about it is that having those combinations of sounds, you can describe it and it's a descriptive problem. You can show that there are patterns to how these things combine. And that creates the potential for complex communication and complex meanings. But it doesn't necessarily mean that potential is realized. Like, until we see how they're responding to those calls and if this combination is actually used differently than the other combination, or it's just a pattern that they generate, we need to know more about that.
All right, so we'll stop here. If you have more questions, you can come and ask them until the library closes, I think at 8 p.m., yes. Right? So with that, I would like to thank the library for hosting us. Our panelists, Tori, Artyom, Alvaro. Also, Yara and Nihal for running the activity. I don't think our friends Paddington and Nico are around, but thanks to them as well. Oh, they are. Okay, they are. Thank you. Also, thanks to Christina. You've met her when you entered for helping with everything behind the scenes. And thanks to everyone for being here, for your questions.
Thanks to you, Rada,
Yeah, thank you,
organizing
Rada.
all of this.
And thank you all. Those are great questions.